In this video, I'll be sharing how I like to do my signature foliage technique. You'll notice that I alternate between baby lights and foliage to get the most optimal blend. So for this foil, I'm starting with a baby light. I only really like to start with baby lights when I get to the top of the back section and then all through the front sections, just because I like the underneath of the back to feel a little bit more lived in, a little bit more soft. That way, if they don't get a full every single time that they get their hair done, it's not gonna look funny. So you can see I'm just doing a baby light. I am going in with Schwarzkopf Blonde Me. I started with 7 volume and I worked my way up to 20. Then I'm using that same self-sectioning comb. I'm starting from the bottom, pulling the two sections apart, and then teasing out the little excess hairs. I'm using a balayage board. This one is from Fermar. The balayage boards are honestly the best way to get a seamless foliage. Honestly, if you're just painting in the foil itself, it's so flimsy and you really can't get like the precise angles that you want. In this foil, I'm doing a deep V. I like to alternate between V sections and deep right and left diagonals. That creates the most soft blend. Then I'm going to repeat this exact same process through the front sections, although I'm going to take everything on a diagonal. That way when it lays really softly. Then I did a nice money piece, nothing that's going to be too thick, just something that's going to give her some nice sun-kissed brightness up around her face. Then I'm going in and I'm going to be rooting and glossing with Redken Shades EQ. I don't know off the top of my head what I was using, but I will leave the formula down below. You want to make sure that you're using a short bristled brush. This one is from Redken, I believe. And I like using a brush like this because it gets a really precise application and the bristles are pretty thick, so it is easy to transfer the product. You want to make sure that you're taking small to medium sized sections, that way your saturation is completely good. That way you don't end up with any weird bleeders or anything that didn't cover. That was my number one mistake when I was first doing hair, is I didn't take thin enough sections or let it process long enough so it didn't fully cover everything like I'd hoped. Then honestly, I am just smudging right where I put those baby lights. You don't need to take the smudge further than the baby lights because if you're just doing foliage underneath there, it's going to blend really seamlessly. Then I'm going in with my Olivia Garden brush. I am using the one for fine to medium hair. This is my favorite tool when it comes to blurring and blending. I like it because it doesn't transfer product through your ends. The bristles are just soft enough to create a soft blend, not hard enough to really do any like transferring, if that makes sense. Then I'm going through with her front sections. I am going to take this on a diagonal. I'm making sure that the sections closest to the back, there is depth stretched down further. Once I get closer to the face, you'll notice that I progressively make my smudge smaller and smaller. That way it will create more of a halo effect to it. So she'll have more lightness and brightness around her face, a little bit more lived in depth in the back. That way as it grows out really nice and it doesn't have any harsh lines. Once again, make sure you're taking really thin sections so that way it's evenly saturated. One thing you can do as well is if you're worried about stuff bleeding on the hair that you're folding over, take a piece of foil and put it on their roots so that way when you fold this over, it's not touching anything that you don't want it to. Then you'll see once I'm getting up to her front sections, I'm just going to be tapping these just a little bit. And let's say you wanted to have someone who their money piece wanted to be all the way up, I would smudge the ones just like right in front of or right behind those, just so they don't have like some crazy weird boxy money piece and everything else around it is really soft. So I would just not smudge like their very front pieces. Then go in and blur. You're gonna want to brush this so good. When in doubt, brush more. You also want to keep in mind that with Redken Shades EQ, this is a more of a translucent color. So if you're wanting to counteract really harsh or stubborn lines, I would recommend mixing this with, mixing Redken Shades EQ with either Joico 5 volume, or I really love Goldwell Colorants with their 10 volume. Those ones work really well too. But just remember, Shades has more of a translucent feel to it, so you can always go in and drop down just a level or so if you want to make sure that you cover everything perfectly. But with hers, everything was like really nice, so I just know that I needed to blur out just like the roots of it. Then I'm just going in and finishing smudging around the other side. With doing a root smudge and a gloss, you want to make sure that you're going to leave it on for the full time. That way you can really maximize your end result, because you want to remember, like, she may not get her hair done super often, like, so you want to make sure that it's going to look good for as long as possible. Then I'm going to go in and show you how I like to smudge her front pieces. Going in, just baby tapping that. I'm going to hit that back section again. Sorry, the camera's moving a little bit. I didn't really notice this until I went in to record. Baby tap. And once again, at this point, I would say the remaining hair that's out, you could definitely leave that out and have the money piece all the way up, or I like to smudge these just a little bit. And I'm using a level 6 on my root, so keep in mind when the hair is wet, it is going to dilute it just a little bit, so this is probably going to be about a level 6.5. Go through, comb that through, then I'm going to let this sit on just like how her hair is normally parted. Go and smudge that, make sure everything's nice and blurred. Then brush that through. Then I'm going in with my gloss. Yummy. This process is so fascinating to me. I always tell people that this is what hairstylists love to look at, is just videos of people glossing their hair, because it's so satisfying. You do want to make sure that you're getting full saturation when it comes to glossing, because if you don't, you will notice that the hair will almost have like some splotchiness of like untoned, if that makes sense. I've noticed that if you don't saturate fully, or like let's say you didn't mix up enough product, then you'll notice that like some pieces will take really good and some pieces like halfway down will have like the perfect tone. So make sure you mix up enough product. I typically like to start with about 2 ounces of color, 2 ounces developer, and then that's typically good for most people. Some people have to do a little bit less, some people have to do a little bit more, but that's typically kind of a good starting point. After I do every section, I do like to go through and brush it through just to make sure that every single section has enough product on it. Then I want to make sure that you're really getting together the root color and the mid and end color. That way it all just blends really nicely. Once you have your gloss on, you're going to let this sit on for about 15 to 20 minutes. Shades EQ has a processing time of 20 minutes, so you want to make sure that you're formulating correctly. That way you can leave it on for the full processing time. One thing that is a good thing to keep in mind is Shades EQ colors tend to pull more cool tone. So if, for example, my girl, she has some warmth in it, but it's not crazy overly warm. I do want to keep her a little bit more on the warmer side, so I will be using a little bit of cool toned colors, but mainly more warm toned. That way I can let her process the full time. That way it'll neutralize all that initial warmth of that like yellowy tone and leave her with just more of like a buttery blonde. You want to make sure that after you applied your gloss that you walk away, because you'll kind of psych yourself out if you're sitting there watching it oxidize, because things oxidize weird, especially very ashy colors. They tend to look very ultra pigmented, but if you actually let it fully sit on, it neutralizes and it looks really nice. If you rinse things out too prematurely, you'll notice that like, oh, some pieces are purple, some pieces are weird. Like, make sure you walk away, give it the full processing time, and trust your formula. Now I'm going through and just rinsing this out. You want to make sure that you're using kind of like lukewarm water. Some people will say cold, but I don't like to freeze my clients out. Then I'm going in and just blow drying her hair. You always want to make sure that when you're blow drying that you're using a concentrator. This is going to make your blow dry really soft and seamless and get rid of all that fun frizz. Then I'm going in with my Babyliss 1-inch curling iron. I do like to curl all the curls going away from the face and pretty much going all the same direction. I find that if I want my curls to lay really seamlessly together, that I have to curl them all the same direction. This is a good tip, especially if your hair struggles to hold curl. You want to make sure to curl everything in the same direction. That way they're not just pulling each other out. So this is what it looks like straight. This is what it looks like curled. I'll show you again our before and our after. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed.